Hello, my friends. Hello. It is Alexandria Nicole, and I am here for Thriving Thursdays. And today we have an amazing guest. We are here with Derrick Calvert, the owner and founder of Empower 52. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Derrick. I'm super excited to talk to you about everything that you have going on and all the value that you add. I'm super excited about it. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here today.
Absolutely. So tell us about what you do, how you started Empower 52, and what it is that you are working to change within our system with your organization and your operation.
Yeah, thanks so much for asking that question. So, Empower 52 is an organization that we go into schools and organizations to really ensure that the environments are psychologically safe, right? What we like to do is differentiate between culture and psychologically safe environments. And so the difference is a culture is something that already exists when I come into an organization or a space, right?
Right.
And so I am integrated into that culture. That also doesn't mean that I feel safe enough to bring my full self to the place. And so
Right.
that's where the psychologically safe environments come along, where I'm able to bring my full self. So I started Empower 52 about 2 years ago, and we've been kind of rolling ever since.
And that's so good because nowadays, I think it's been like this forever, but you see a lot of code switching where people don't feel like they can show up as their truest self, or they don't feel comfortable in the way that they wear their hair, or the way that they actually would like to dress, or the way that they would really like to speak to be their true self, right? So you feel like you have to be someone other than who you truly are to be accepted in a certain environment. So I love the fact that you said that culture is something that you're stepping into before you even arrive, right? So when people bring you in, is it because they recognize there's something that needs to be fixed within their culture and they need help facilitating that process?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. What I always tell people, especially when they bring me in, you know, being having an environment that's psychologically safe or an ecosystem, right? I'll also say I differentiate between environment and ecosystem. An environment is my settings, right? Those things, they kind of change without, me having to put any input in. But in terms of my ecosystem, it's inclusive, right? So it's an
Mm,
interaction between myself, the environment, the people, or everything within the environment. And so what I always tell people is, you want to make sure your environments or ecosystems are psychologically safe, because if they're not, one, employee turnover is massive. And that's
right.
typically where people kind of bring me in and say, hey, we're losing a lot of employees. We really don't know, what the issue is, or where the opportunity is. And so I can come in and kind of do some assessments and kind of figure out, hey, where's the biggest opportunity for us to grow? And so typically when they bring me in, we do an assessment, we kind of figure out where it is, and then we start to kind of deconstruct environments and ecosystems and start to reconstruct, um, where we want to be and what we want to represent.
Right. And I love that they bring you in as kind of an outside perspective, because sometimes when you're so ingrained in the culture and you don't know any other way to operate, it's hard to identify where those problem areas are. But if you're coming from the outside and you have a totally different perspective, you're unbiased, there's no loyalty to anyone in particular, and they bring you in specifically with the objective to help them figure out how they can strengthen their team, right? So you're like, so what's the process look like for you? Do you sit down with the staff and you talk to them, or do you just kind of stand back and evaluate and see how things are? What does that process look like for Empower 52 when you're coming in to help with that type of culture?
Yeah, I love that question. So it's I kind of go about it two different ways. In my past life, I was an administrator, and part of my job was to evaluate teachers, right? And so, being a former teacher myself, understanding how nerve wracking it is for someone to kind of come into your classroom or your space and just kind of sit there and not say anything and kind
Right.
of evaluate you, right? My process is I like to build relationship. I'm a very big relationship person. So not only am I coming in and sitting down with leadership, not only am I coming in, I'm sitting down with employees. We're doing anonymous surveys, but I'm really also really ingraining myself in the community outside of the organization, right? Because as we know, the community in the outside of the organization, it impacts the organization as a whole. So when I go in and I want to know everything about everything. And it helps me do my job so much better because now I understand nuance, right? So while I'm coming in as an objective person, I'm really, I'm like I said, when I ingrain myself into the culture and the ecosystems, I really become part of the ecosystem. I become part of the organization, and I like people to see me as that. I don't want them to see me as, oh, Derrick's coming. It's a got you. It's no, Derrick's coming. I'm comfortable, and I want to tell him, hey, this is what's going on in my day. This is how I feel, in my daily work, and so forth and so on.
Right. And I love that too, the fact that you do, if relationships are so important to you. So therefore your approach is going to be different. You're not the weird guy in the corner with a pen and a pad and like giving stink eye. You're like, hey, I'm Derrick.
Absolutely.
Let's talk. What would you like to be better? Right.
Yeah.
And I feel like that relationship building is going to give people the opportunity to even feel safe with you, that's your objective, right? And so there might be a little bit more transparent with you about some things that they, ways they're not feeling seen or heard or valued within the company. And then you can take that back and give that to the person that you're partnered with, the decision maker, right? And
Absolutely.
say these are the ways that you can empower your team, your staff. These are some ways that they're not really feeling valued. So I love that relationship approach so they can feel safe with you, right? So
Yeah.
how long does a process typically take for you to come in and really evaluate and put together a plan and move it forward? Because essentially with what you're doing, how I imagine it is you have to evaluate it and then totally deconstruct the system and the culture, which is challenging, I can imagine, because we push against change, we push against the unknown, right? But
Right.
you have to deconstruct that to build something back up even healthier. So how long does that process really take?
Yeah, you know what? That varies. It varies greatly depending on the size of the organization, the size of the school, the size of the district, and the objective, right? That the leaders who brought me in would like to accomplish. Sometimes it's like, Derrick, we know exactly what's happening. We built a culture of perfection, and now no one wants to speak up. How do we deconstruct that and build a culture of comfortability, right? Um,
Ah,
that takes that may take a different amount of time as opposed to, Dave, we have no idea what's happening, and we need you to kind of come in and look at everything. So what I tell my people is, I'm here for you as long as you need me. You can call me. I'm very accessible, and really, like I said, because I have ingratiated myself within the community, I now am a part of that community, right? So
right.
I have a stake now in that community. So I care just as much as anyone else does.
Yes, and I can imagine, I can see it in my mind where it's like you're sitting down and you're talking with someone and you're asking them questions and they're like, everything is perfect. I love my job.
Yeah,
Right? So
yeah,
so I wonder like how long does it take for that veil to kind of come down and for you to build a relationship with them as an individual and for them to not potentially see you as a threat, but instead see you as someone that is there to help usher in greatness for
yeah.
longevity and sustainability for the betterment of the company. So how long does that process take? And does that vary same too? Just trust in people and all the things that make us individuals?
It does. You hit it right there on the head. I mean, believe it or not, that happens all the time. Like, my job is perfect and I love everything about it, and I just don't want to be in trouble, right? Uh,
Right.
I mean,
Right.
those are fun, right? And it kind of helps me kind of take apart puzzle pieces and kind of put puzzle pieces together. I love that part of my work. One of the things I do to kind of start to build the relationships is organizations and schools will bring me in to do like professional learning, right? They'll say, hey, you know what, we need some, excuse me, we need some professional learning on microaggressions, right? And
Mm,
so we can kind of go in and start to do that professional learning, and it's very inquiry based, right? And it's very human based. I'm not just going in and I'm giving you a bunch of facts like, oh, this is a microaggression, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do this. It is real life experiences, and
mm,
oftentimes through those workshops and those professional learnings, people will come up to me and say, hey, I have a question, and we start to build relationships like that. And then they go
mm.
to their coworkers and say, hey, I asked Derrick about this, and he really helped me out with this, and maybe you should go talk to him. And so before you know it, I'm integrated into the circles, right?
Right,
As both, with the workers as well as with leadership.
right,
And they both trust me, right? Because what I always tell workers, what I always tell employees is, whatever you say here with me is safe, right?
right.
And so when I go back to leadership, it's never, Sandra said this, and you probably need to fix this. It's, hey, this is
Right.
what we're noticing. Here's the data from the surveys
I love that.
that says XYZ. And so these are our plans of action. Let's sit down together. Now, I'm not only just sitting down with leadership, I'm also encouraging leadership to create committees, right, from the employees. So they're also very, very ingratiated in the whole process, right?
Right.
So it's not just leadership and me. It's, again, we're an entire community.
I love that. So, what was your motivator behind pursuing this type of consulting? And I love what it is that you're doing, and it's so necessary. And I could see you partnering with DEI people even on this because it's within the same realm, right? But
Absolutely.
what motivated you to want to pivot from your 15 years of being in the school system as a teacher, administrator, as a principal, and then going out on your own to be a consultant to help create safe cultures in companies and organizations?
Believe it or not, it, think about it like this. It's 2015. It is my first year as an administrator. And as a teacher, I was a great relationship builder. My kids loved me. We had talked. I mean, it was, again, I had learned to create a very safe space. And so
Mm-hmm.
as I'm coaching teachers, a lot of my kids would come to my office and they're like, I don't know what's happening. She doesn't like me. And I'm like, hey, what's going on? And so I learned in that first year that building relationships are not innate, right? We
Mm-hmm.
actually have to, some of us have to learn how to do those things. Um,
Absolutely.
and so I kind of started to explore that a little bit more and started to talk to teachers and administrators about how we build relationships with students and how we build relationships with staff. And then as I continued to kind of move up and work in entire districts, and that kind of spawned into where we are now. So not only, again, am I not only looking at relationships with kids, but now I'm looking at relationships with peer to peer, from leader to peer, from leader to employee. And so that's kind of how I got here. It was really my love for relationships with kids that kind of spawned where we are today.
Oh, that is fantastic. That is fantastic. I cannot wait to hear more, but we have got to stop for our 30-second break to hear from our sponsors. So don't go anywhere. It's only 30 seconds. And I want to get back to what Derrick is talking about. It's so good. We'll be right back in just a second.
Dr. Emily Latran, a Forbes Coaches Council member alongside the founder of mom-owned businesses, Itachi Hokage, team up to bring a virtual business summit at a price you cannot refuse. You should attend if you want to have a 7-figure business that is highly profitable. Create an effective marketing strategy for leads and sales. Achieve a lifestyle of freedom where the business can run without you. Implement the right systems to increase profitability, create multiple streams of income, and much more. Sponsors and speaker inquiries are still being accepted. Contact us via email at momonbusinesses@gmail.com.
No, so thank you so much for our sponsors. We appreciate your support of Thriving Thursdays with Alexandria. So back to Derrick. Now let's get into this now. What do you deem to be a safe psychological, that's a tongue twister, let me get it right now, a safe psychological ecosystem? There it is. What do you deem that to be? What does that look like? What are you working towards in these organizations?
Great question. The first thing I want people to know is that safe psychological ecosystems, they take place in groups, right? Organizations are so large, right? So it's hard to, if I'm, in an entry level position to, feel safe and go say, hey, I'm going to go talk to the CEO. That's the goal eventually, right? But what we want to do is start to create them in groups. And what that looks like, and I'll give you a story of an organization that I was working with. A nurse, right? And she was a newcomer into the hospital, and she was very nervous. She had been practicing, for years. She was very, very seasoned, but the environment that she went into, again, the culture was, we don't say anything to our doctors. We just kind of let them do what they do, right? So I was able to kind of go in, and what she was seeing was there were a lot of things that were happening that could eventually cause, some major issues.
Mm-hmm.
And what we saw was that she was afraid to speak up because of the culture there.
Right.
And so what we really had to do is we went in and we said, hey, you know what? Here's the anonymous survey, my interviews with people, me kind of sitting down, and we really hashed it out, and we really identified where this culture kind of comes from, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what we found, that culture just kind of comes from, it's just the dynamic that everybody felt was the right thing to do. Right. So she kind of was integrated into their culture. So what a safe psychological ecosystem looks like is, I'm able to speak up. I'm able to say, hey, I think if we do X as opposed to Y, we may get a different outcome, right? And not expect any retaliation or any stares like, why are you saying this? You're new, or you're not in that position to be saying that, right?
Right.
It also doesn't mean that we're super nice all the time, right? We all know, especially if we have siblings, there's some storming and some norming, right? We fight, we argue, but at the end of the day, we all have the same common goal. And if we all have the same common goal, then I should be able to say, hey, Derrick, you know what? When this happened in the meeting the other day, these are the outcomes, the negative outcomes that I see. Here are the positive outcomes. How can we work together to kind of, bring the vision about without, all the negative outcomes. And so me being able to bring my full self to work allows me to say, I can speak up. I have value, right? It's all about feeling valued and feeling like I'm heard. That is one of the number one reasons people leave jobs. I'm unfulfilled, I don't feel heard, and I don't feel valued. In a safe psychological ecosystem, all of those things are present.
Oh, that is so good. And we before we went to break, we were talking about the importance of the skill as well as communication in that, right? So it seems like you also rely heavily on emotional intelligence. And there might be an infrastructure of hierarchy, but if someone finds value and they found validation in their title, they might feel intimidated by someone that's at a lower level than them, right? Bringing a new idea to the table. So we have to also kind of be reliant on being emotionally intelligent enough and being confident enough within yourself to receive insight and contributions from someone that is at a different position as you. You know what I mean? Wasn't it the guy, the Frito-Lay's guy? He was a janitor, and then he came up with I love that, right?
Yeah.
So having a collaborative environment, I really hope that continues to be the way that we operate in the future, because everybody is valuable. That's right. I believe your culture and your experiences and everything, your life and everything has everyone has something that they can bring to the table and offer value. And we want to invite people to feel that value too, right?
Absolutely.
It's
Absolutely.
so
Absolutely.
important. So what do you classify as the epidemic of silence? What does that mean to you?
So again, just like in the example we just kind of talked about, understanding and knowing that things, aren't as good as they should be, or we're not going the route that we should be. And so what happens is when I don't feel safe, I choose self-preservation over
Mm,
collaboration, right?
mm,
I
mm.
choose to say, you know what, I don't want to be embarrassed today, or I don't want to be embarrassed, or I don't want anybody to shoot my ideal down. So I'm just gonna dial back, and I'm going to seek back into myself and kind of keep my ideas to myself, right? And
Right.
oftentimes what we find is somebody else who feels safe will say, hey, XYZ. And you're like, that's the idea that I had, right?
Mm,
Like, oh, I
mm.
should have said that, but I didn't. And so I'm silent, and I'm just kind of allowing things to happen. It's a very passive role, right? As opposed to
Yeah.
being active. Psychologically safe ecosystems are active. So the epidemic of silence is very passive, and I just, again, I'm going to do anything and everything I can to preserve myself. That's not
Mm.
that's not selfish. It's just that I'm not in a place yet where I feel ready or safe enough to say, this is who I am, this is what I bring to the table, and these are the outcomes that can happen because of that.
And even on the flip side, on the polar opposite situation, you find microaggressions in the form of someone articulating an idea and then people loving it, but then giving the credit to someone else for that idea who's in a higher ranking position. And that can
Absolutely.
also be the catalyst for somebody retreating, like, oh, I'm not going to sit in here in this meeting and have a good idea, and then Billy Bob takes the credit because he's the VP. So guess what? Here comes the silence.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
You know, you
So
know
it could
the,
be on the flip side.
Yeah, the biggest symptom of microaggressions, right? For those who receive them, is isolationism. If
Mm,
I'm constantly being inundated with microaggression day after day after day, encounter after encounter, the natural thing to do is isolate myself from my peers, from my leaders, and now I'm just there doing a job as opposed to fulfilling my purpose.
absolutely. Absolutely. Oh my gosh, that's so good. And it's so necessary. So when you leave and you have kind of laid the framework and you've laid the foundation for them to rebuild a healthier work environment on, is it just does it just feel you does it just feel amazing to know that you have contributed to a cultural change within that organization?
I One of the first things I always tell people when I go into organizations and schools, just like a therapist, my job is to ensure that you don't need me anymore, right?
Yes.
And so once I leave and we've set that foundation, we've set up systems to continue that foundation and grow. For me, it's the best feeling ever, right?
Yeah.
Because again, we're part of something that not only is helping an organization, helping people, helping leaders, helping students grow, but it's helping the community grow. Because now the lessons that you've learned from these workshops or these sit downs or the lessons that we've learned from surveys, I can now go teach that to someone else.
Right.
And the message continues it, to get passed down. If I leave here and I get a better opportunity, I'm going to take these lessons to that place, right? And so now I can start that movement in my new place of work. So I mean, for me, it fills my heart. I mean, it really does.
Oh, I bet it does. I bet it does. So, how have you helped the organizations create that psychological safe ecosystem? Ecosystem. I can't get that word to save my life now. Like,
Okay.
you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. You
How do
know,
you do that?
like I said, through workshops and building relationships. But if I were going to tell, a freebie, okay, if I were going to tell organizations, the best way to start to build these safe psychological ecosystems is to listen. is really to listen. Go, and I used to tell my teachers, like, hey, why don't you just go have lunch with your students, right? Go have lunch with your employees, right? Figure out, how you like to be celebrated, right? And that's a huge thing that has kind of come up. Like, everybody doesn't like, this big grandiose, like, oh, shout out to Derrick, he did XYZ. Some people like, hey, I did really well, and to celebrate me, can you just spend some more time with me and teach me something new, right? So really start to listen and build those relationships, not to respond, right? But to be there. That's the biggest thing, right? And when we do that and we build those relationships and we listen, we see the transition from a gripe session, oh, I hate my job and I hate this and I hate this, to I have now someone I can confide in, right? And I now have power to change the ecosystem in which I inhabit.
My God, that's so good. We could end the podcast on that word right there, because that's so good. So what services do you provide? What does that look like when people call you and they want to partner with Empower 52? What does that process look like?
Yeah. So you call me, you get in contact with me. I come in and I'll do a free consultation, and I'll say, hey, you know what? Let's figure out first, what you want to focus on, right? Bring all your data to the table. I'm a data person. Of course, I'm a former educator. So bring all your data to the table. Let's kind of disaggregate it and figure out where we need to go. Once we finish that consultation, we can start to kind of deconstruct where we are, identify the things that are working, because we don't want to throw those out. We want to keep those. Identify the things that are not working, and then we want to build a healthy marriage of the old systems that work with the new systems that we're inputting into the organization. And so, I mean, when we go in, it's all hands on deck. It's boots on the ground, because we're in a human-centered business, right? It's not right. Yeah, it's not about, hey, how can this organization make more money? We're dealing with people, and people are human, right? And so we always want to keep that in mind.
Yeah, but when there is a healthy space that people operate in, the byproduct of that is increased revenue.
Absolutely.
Now you've decreased your turnover rate. Now you don't have to keep hiring and firing management. Now you don't have to hire that recruiting agency, because you've built and you've sown into your team, and you've got a team that works well together, and they're executing, and everybody's sharing ideas and coming up with innovative ways to approach things. And then it's just a natural byproduct of the solution, of the foundation of a safe space. So yeah, the profit might not be 100% of what we're after, because we are in the business of people, but it does help exponentially when the organization has it together.
Absolutely. It's very expensive to fire and retrain and rehire. Very expensive. Yeah. And the more we can keep our people and our talent and the innovation within the organization, you're right, the byproduct is increased revenue. Absolutely.
Oh my goodness, so good. So contact Empower 52. You can contact him for a free consultation. All you have to do is call or text him at 346-573-5752. And yeah, contact him. This man is shifting the dynamic of organizations across the U.S. It is such a pleasure to have him here. This has been such a great conversation. Empower 52, you guys. If you work for a company or you own a company and there's some kink in your system and you really can't figure it out, and you need to outsource the help with a professional such as this man, do it. Do it now. You learn anything today, okay? Absolutely. So the time has come. This 30 minutes has flown by, honey. So it is time for a prayer disclaimer, okay? So we are a podcast that prays. So we close out each podcast with prayer to honor God for our abundance. Go ahead and hit the music so we can honor God with the silence and get this prayer on. Yes, Lord. You ready, Derrick?
Yes, ma'am.
Dear God, we thank you for another day. I ask you to keep ushering Derrick in the work that he's doing and shifting cultures and creating healthy foundations for businesses and people to show up as their authentic self and show up in every bit of their greatness and feel safe in their environment, because we have all experienced a workplace that made us feel lesser than, that made us feel belittled, that was a point of contention in our lives and made us feel depressed and dreading going in. And Derrick, Lord, I ask that you cover him and empower 52 and his teammates in changing that dynamic and creating a safe space for people to go and spend their 8 hours a day. Lord, I ask that you continue to bless him on his journey. And thank you for having him on our platform and sharing him with your people, Lord God. I pray these things according to the character and identity of Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Amen, my brother.
Amen.
So good. So
Thank
good.
you.
Well, this is it. This was it. You did fantastic. I'm super excited about Empower 52. And if there is ever anyone that comes to me that I am consulting or they are with a larger company and they need help beyond their branding strategies, you're my guy. I'm pointing them in your direction, okay?
I appreciate that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, my friend, have a blessed rest of your day. Thank you to everyone that is watching. We will see you next week. Okay? Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.